Welcome back, Screamers, and welcome back, Dev'n About Town.
Yay!
What's new?
Truly nothing.
This is what she said earlier when I asked her this question, too.
Yeah. Just community things. Actually, community things, but nothing. That's the goal, because I'm always doing something, trying to take a break. And so the month of July, I have absolutely nothing planned but couch, house, porch. That's the goal.
Sounds good.
Yes.
That sounds great.
Yeah. It's a good goal.
Okay.
We'll see if
I have this idea of myself, like, where I'm absolutely 100% completed on everything. Like, all the laundry's done. I mean, even down to the little minutia, right? Where, like, every bill is paid, every I is dotted, every T is crossed. And I know I will never get there. It's always a Sisyphean kind of existence that I lead. But, man, that dream of just having, like, everything finished. Like, on my deathbed, I'll just be like, oh, yes.
Now it's really
real.
handled.
I just lean into procrastination and enjoy it.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
No, I do that as well.
I imagine Sisyphus happy. We do double as like a philosophy podcast. I don't know if
Yes.
whistling as he's pushing the ball up.
like just enjoying his time doing his thing.
You know, I was thinking about that. There's a lady who is off of Lancaster, and it's Lancaster and Oakland, and every single day she's out there and she's singing gospel songs.
Okay.
And like, I think that she sells CDs or something, but she's just out there. And I'm like, I was talking to my wife the other day. It's like, do you ever think she gets up in the morning? It's like, the last fucking thing I want to do is praise Jesus. Like, I don't want.
Back to the corner, though.
Just like not today.
Right, I got a job, right?
Yeah. Not today. I did tell someone, though, after the last time that I was on, I was like, man, I had to keep up with them. They were throwing out the philosophy and the history, and I love it because I don't get it often, but I definitely was like, ooh, I had to keep up.
We are intellectually stimulating.
Yeah.
At least to some. Right. So
Thought
leave a
provoking.
review if you're listening. so the last time you were here for the Woman King episode, and you're back today to talk about Star Wars, or the original trilogy. On that episode, you mentioned kind of offhandedly, right, that you just started kind of watching Star Wars, and you had, I don't know, some questions about like who these cats were.
I thought it was that you had dabbled in fantasy, like there were other like series and that you were a part of. Like, I don't even if it was like Game of Thrones and Star Trek. But like Star Wars had always eluded you at some point.
Yes. As soon as you started speaking Brock, I was like, wait, I said that? I lied. But that is correct, Jason. It is all the others, and Star Wars has eluded me, but no longer conquered.
And so we're also at the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi this year.
Which just got released, re-released in theaters last week, I believe. So,
and we kind of thought this would be an interesting time, right?
Yeah.
To bring her back, to bring you back, I'm sorry, to talk about this, to kind of dig into it. We are not experts. Jason might be an expert.
No, and
I am not.
I want to lay that out there too, because there are people that are washed in the blood of Star Wars, right? So they'll they live and breathe this stuff.
I would say drowned in.
Right. And there's a whole, mythology. So I will say that I have a pinky toe dipped into, but I'm not like, but if you're sitting at home and you're listening, or you have Star Wars fans that are listening to this, and we mess something up, that's like what I just did with my words. It's gonna be like that throughout the entire podcast. We're gonna say things that are incorrect, like, that Darth Vader and Obi-Wan were lovers at one point. That kind of thing. It's just going to really.
I think that's really interesting to bring that up and to talk about. Maybe it was. Maybe they were. I'm sure in someone's fan fiction they were.
It's possible. Right? So here's
in fan fiction, and I feel like any fandom, they're going to correct y'all. So
for sure.
No worries.
For sure. Okay. Go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, like, before, I teased Jason a lot about being older than me. And he is, but only by a few years. And really, at a certain point, we're just kind of the same age anyway. But we are, I think, very squarely in Generation X, or at least we sort of take up that mantle. And you are not.
I am a millennial. I'm a bridge millennial. We had outside, but we also pushed technology.
Okay.
Both memories, whereas there's the ones behind us only know technology games.
Gotcha.
Inside game, like things like that. they don't know the phrase "when the streetlights came on" kind of thing.
That's when you're supposed to
which
go
is
home.
Squarely y'all's generation with a little bit.
We
of
just
tech.
threw rocks at the streetlights and stayed
them
out.
out.
Yeah.
So you're and not to be like, I know this is a sensitive topic sometimes, but are you an 80s baby or a 90s baby?
I'm an 80s baby.
Okay.
It's a sensitive topic.
I don't know. I just with age,
people
it's just
probably. I mean,
you
I
look
just learned
24.
Fun
It's not like
facts.
it's
Well, right. So we've known each other for a while, and I still don't think I know like your actual age.
I think we're going on 7 years,
Right.
so I don't really often tell people this. But also, I just learned Abbott Elementary, which I love, the TV show. The Ava, the principal, the lady who portrays her, the actress, comedian, has never revealed her age. No one knows how old she is.
Good for
she
her.
refuses to acknowledge it. And I'm like, yeah, good for you. But no, I am 80s baby, 90s raised for sure. But all of my playmates, for lack of better, because my parents had me so young, were 70s, 80s teenagers kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So even that bridge. All that to say, I kind of figured while I was watching it, you guys probably got the experience of we're watching it. It just kind of came out as it's coming out. Whereas for me, I had to go look at a timeline because there's so much that had already been spoiled and people
Right,
talked about
sure.
and things. And I was like, let me just at least sort it before I come into this.
That's exactly where I was going with that question, with picking on Jason for being so much older. Was that I was curious how you had.
This is why we keep a defibrillator in the corner, just
because he
in
might
case.
just keel over.
Just in case.
But I was curious how you came to see them. But I was also curious how many of these, Jason, did you see in the theater?
So I didn't see the original in the theater, the first run. So my first memory is the re-release of Star Wars prior to, because these ended up getting, this is why they kind of stayed in the zeitgeist for so long, as they ended up getting re-released right before the other movie came out. And honestly, Star Wars, from that perspective, really never left theaters. There were theaters that it ran for an entire year.
My dad told me this long ago.
And so you're seeing Star Wars still in this theater until 78, 79, and then they re-release it before it comes out in 80. So I remember going to see the Empire in the theaters. And of course, Jedi, of course. But I also remember just parking up and watching Star Wars. Like we would go to I lived in Midland, Texas. We would go to the mall.
Oh, yeah.
And I would bounce from Star Wars to the pirate movie or whatever else was playing at the time and go back and forth. And I'd catch the last half of both of those movies all day long kind of thing. So
I'm just curious what that pirate movie might be. Something with Errol Flynn, probably.
No, Christopher Atkins and Christy McNichol. It's the Pirates. It's the musical version. Well, it's not musical version. It's the parody version of Pirates of Penzance, which I will make you watch at some point. It's a terrible movie.
Again, no, aging, because I was like, oh, Treasure Island with...
Yeah, no.
no.
I did see that one in the theater as well, but the animated version you're talking about, right? Or are you talking something else?
I'm talking about, is it not Treasure... The one where the grandfather reads the book. And
Princess Bride.
The Princess Bride?
Oh my goodness, you're correct. Yes. And here's the thing, I remember watching that as a child and never being able to figure out what the title was, because commercials, you go do the chore, then come back kind of thing. And I truly was in college when I learned the name. So that's probably why it has not stuck.
And you're like, why is Columbo playing a grandfather?
Yeah. Which I grew...
Is he Mikey or Nikki? That's a...
I mean, I spent my summers with my great-grandmother and grandmother, so no, I know Columbo well. Very well. Still occasionally watch him kind of thing.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
There's no shame in that.
I have Peacock just for Columbo episodes.
Oh, look, see, smart.
So before you watch these, what did you think Star Wars was? Like, what did you think it was? What did you think it was about?
Okay, so truly no real thoughts in the sense that 7th grade AP teacher, she loved Star Wars, and I'll never forget her being like, our pre-AP, we finished all our tests, so last 2 weeks, we're going to watch Star Wars, and the hooked children, as teachers will do, she's like, there's a love triangle involving a brother and sister. and I went home to my parents and was like, what in the world is this? And my dad was like, I love Star Wars. I'm glad y'all are watching it. I did not. I actually played spoons in the back of the classroom, so I still had no clue going into it this time. But I kept mentioning it to a lot of people, and I did learn that there are people who love Star Wars, and there are people who Star Wars is life. And the people who love it often get overshadowed, but they're the ones who give more insight. And so a lot of people who just love it, it's not life, but they appreciate it, said that they were like, it's just a good hero journey. And so I was like, okay, I'm about this. Going in, because again, what's been revealed, I thought Han Solo was the hero journey, which he has his own thing going on. But then I was like, oh no, it's actually Luke. Okay. And then because I did read the timeline, even though we stuck to the first original, I do know that Luke, and there's just more that happens.
Yeah, I'm sure that the other ones will sort of come into the conversation at some point.
Right, 16 years from now when we make you watch the prequel.
Right.
Because we gotta build up anticipation just like we all had to.
Yeah.
Notice how ambitious he is about this podcast.
Yeah, 16
Did you see the look I just gave you?
By then you just like tap it in with the thing on your wrist. Right, you don't have to even meet in person.
For some fucking married couple or something.
I did have a question because you mentioned earlier the 6th episode that they came back out. It's 40th anniversary or something. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the 40th anniversary of Jedi.
Okay, of Jedi. So at the very end, they're having their celebration party, and you see Obi-Wan and.
So what you saw.
Who are the third person that pops up?
What you saw was the special editions. So
okay,
the real rub and what it's one of these things that kind of like again adds to the lore because Lucas released these and then really, I mean, honestly, never does anything else other than Star Wars, right? He does Howard the Duck, and he does Red Tails, and he dabbles, and then of course he does do the producing on Indiana Jones, that whole quadrilogy at this point. But he never. What's that?
The director of Indiana Jones is not
Spielberg.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so that was their collaboration because that was one of those serial type movies that they loved so much when they were kids, and they were recreating that, which is what Star Wars is as well.
Flash Gordon.
He wanted to make Flash Gordon. Flash Gordon was tied up with another studio, so
Dino De Laurentiis.
Yeah, so he couldn't get the rights to it.
Okay.
And then he already had a script, and he just changed it to be this completely new story, and he thought, that this was going to be a flop, that it wasn't going to be, like, he never thought he would get, it was just the whole thing that was not, he did not think it was going to blow up. Now, he did have a whole arc. He had a huge story.
Okay.
So he broke it up into parts. And basically, Star Wars is what was manageable at the time, given the budget that he had. Mm-hmm. And it was really the portion of the story that was a self-contained story. Because as you get into Empire, clearly that's leaving on a cliffhanger. And
he had to kind of he only had sort of like an outline for the rest of it, right?
Right.
Because then he brought in, Lee Brackett and and someone else wrote a speculative novel, right, for part 2 because he was like, look, part 2 will never get made, but just in case something does happen, we get another chance at this, go ahead and start writing this thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And weren't the episode numbers?
The episode numbers came in.
Didn't he put those later?
But not so much later. Like, the episode, he knew, he put episode 4. Like, the first release of Star Wars in the theater didn't have episode 4.
Okay.
But that came pretty close out. It did not, he didn't wait until Empire to put it up there.
Right.
So there were theatrical
So it was like
prints.
when it came back out again.
Right, it's at episode 4.
6 months later, then it had episode 4. Yeah.
And again, not exactly on the timeline, but yes. And so remind me of your question again. No, okay. Yeah, so the Hayden question. Sorry. No, it's fine. This is how we do. And also, I'm old and decrepit,
Hayden,
so
that
I
is his
can't.
name. I was like, it is not Hans Christian Andersen, but this is where I keep going.
So going back to that, George Lucas never stopped tinkering with these, even when they were released in the 70s. So in 97, he did a huge push because
he's just a kid playing.
Right. And he created what were called the official special editions.
Okay.
And those got re-released to the theater. And then so a lot of some of the special effects that you saw were different, obviously, and there were scenes that were added that were different from the original, what you would have seen when you were trying to play spoons in the class.
Because I'm not going to lie, I was like, I I definitely expected to be able to tell much more clear the special effects. There's been some blending.
So, and really, even after special editions were released, there are people that are very in tune with every single minuscule change that has been made. So yes, he's continually made changes up until what you probably watched him on Disney Plus, or.
When I say watch them on Disney Plus, up until I legit finished the last one an hour ago.
Perfect.
That's great.
Leaned into that procrastination.
Yes. So the original person who played Darth Vader was named David Prowse, and he was a bodybuilder, huge guy.
Yes, I looked him up because I was like, that's not the body of James Earl Jones.
Right. So he was the picture at the end of Jedi, and this is a lot of controversy because Anakin was played by Hayden Christensen. So the prequel trilogy tells Anakin's origin story, Darth Vader's origin story, right? And so when they finish Revenge of the Sith, they redo Return of the Jedi and put Hayden in there instead of David Prowse. A lot of people were like, "Hey, that's
I heard he was like hated for a while in the Star Wars community."
Hayden Christensen?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And mainly because of that. Like when we get to the prequel trilogy, the acting is a lot more stilted. It almost ruined Jake Lloyd's life, who played very young boy Anakin.
Yeah.
Because there was so much backlash towards his portrayal. That's when the fandom got very, very toxic.
We're experiencing that in
it's
Drag
gotten
Race
so
right
much
now.
better.
Right. Hayden is actually, it was difficult to act under their circumstances if you weren't an established actor. So like Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen don't come off all that well in the prequel trilogy. Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor come off much better because they're and
Sam Jackson
to a lesser degree.
Oh yeah, he is. That's right.
But yeah, but Hayden took a lot of the brunt. But mainly it was Lucas's script that just made it awful. And you know what? I don't want to prejudice you against the prequel trilogy, but
no, I mean I've seen the memes. I've kind of enjoying the timeline, read some stuff, and I was like, oh, I'm very interested in this, but. How do I put this? The struggle it was to get me through these 3 episodes.
Sure.
I don't know if it's for me, simply because the only character that I was really crazy about was Carrie Fisher's.
Right.
But I feel that I can't go forward without going back, kind of thing, in this whole journey of Star Wars universe.
I think the prequels. Look, if you want to get into the minutia of like you would in a Game of Thrones, where you know the governmental dynamics that are breaking up amongst all the families and all of that plays out more in the prequel. Now, it is very, very convoluted, and it is very, very talky, but that whole thing is like, okay, how did the Third Reich become rise to power type of thing? Done in a...
Well, because the Weimar Republic.
Right. So what you're alluded to in the actual Star Wars, like things like the Clone Wars and all of that is played out in the prequel. But that being said, if you're not interested in that, I think you can put that aside, because really Anakin's story doesn't inform the story of Luke's story or Rey's story, which is the next trilogy.
Yes, which according to the timeline, she's about to get Ridley Scott. Right? No, not the young lady.
Daisy Ridley.
Daisy Ridley. I'm terrible with names. Sorry. Daisy Ridley. They said she's gearing up. She's about to come, and that's the next group that they're about to go into.
Right. That's the next set of movies that carry on the Skywalker timeline. Essentially.
I think that's too bad for her.
Daisy Ridley. Yeah. Well, I mean,
I watched her in a film at Sundance this year called "Sometimes I Think About Dying," which is also the subtitle of this podcast. and I thought she was really interesting in her kind of nuanced portrayal of a young woman who's seemingly fine with her kind of everyday life, but sometimes she just thinks about being dead, and sort of that plays into the tension in her life, in her love life, in her dating life, and everything else. I'd much rather see her. Right. I'd much rather see her do these small. Of course, but that's my bias, and I get it. Right.
I think the danger probably is lesser now.
Because
I was going to say, yeah. Do you think? I mean, with all the Marvel and stuff.
Now, I feel like Scarlett Johansson. Go.
No, you're fine. No, and that's. I mean, but Portman was able to escape the prequel trilogies. Now, granted, she was younger. this is all just a matter of, she will need to fully pivot after these next 3 films or whatever she's contractually obligated to do in the Star Wars universe from here on out. But yeah, I think it's possible because again, most of the people that you saw in the follow-up trilogy really haven't been too hampered by that. I mean, you still got
Oscar Isaac.
I mean,
Boyega was in the small act stuff.
Right.
That's what I was going to say. But he's also made a very big persona in his press and his social media, and very publicly, I think, also cut ties with Disney.
Right.
And so I think that kind of makes a difference. But I did think, was Carrie Fisher in anything else?
Postcard? No.
Nope, Mom.
I know.
No, because I too was like, did Snoop?
So she was in Blues Brothers, and she was mostly a writer. But yeah, she was in things like Drop Dead Fred, When Harry Met Sally.
That's right. She was Harry Met Sally. Yeah.
Drop Dead Fred for me. I was addicted to that to the point where it had to be removed from the house. But you're correct, because I remember while I was watching Star Wars, I was like, gosh, I mean, I know we benefited well from her writing, and she did a lot behind the scenes on progressing just Hollywood as best she could. But watching her in this, I was like, she played this character so well. Very strong female character. Definitely, I think, one of the strongest who just knows what they want that I've seen in a very long time. And I kept thinking, I was like, I would have loved to have seen her in other things. But I feel that this was it for her, kind of getting typecast.
I think the money probably kept her in comfort and cocaine, and
there's that.
So and she was Elaine May-esque in a lot of ways, in the sense that she was a huge script doctor in Hollywood. So she would come in and clean up scripts, and they would, she was such a good writer. She was so funny that they would just give her stuff, and then, and so I bet that kept her in things where she didn't. I would imagine having to act in things that you didn't really want to act in, where, it was, so she could pop into a Rob Reiner comedy or do something where, it was with some friends thing. Yeah, but she didn't necessarily have to, because she could have fronted, she could have been in things that she wrote herself.
Right.
And I think it was just a matter of, I don't necessarily
once you have the financial freedom. Plus, I do, and she did speak on it, growing up in the industry, she very much just had a very different perspective of how she wanted to interact and how she could. Because you can definitely tell from film to film where she is in her personal life. And I thought that was very interesting, but at the same time, no less delivered. Like, she showed up for every single scene and hooked me. I look forward to seeing her more. And the little gold robot, what was his name again?
What, C-3PO?
C-3PO? Yes, C-3PO. Loved him.
This is why I wanted to do this podcast.
Absolutely. Like, he hooked me, and I was like, at one point I even thought this is for the simple folks, and we're here for this. I'll take it. I will take that you put him in to be the relief, and I'm happy for it. But those were my people, and I did keep thinking about, in Mexico, R2D2 is known as Arturo. Because that's how it rolls off for them, and so
that's amazing.
Yes, it's Arturo, amazing. And so I kept thinking every time they say his name, I was like, no, it's Arturo. But overall, I have a question.
Yep.
I guess, I don't know, maybe because where I sit in my life and a citizen of the United States, but I was like, okay, I can feel the religious, but I think he meant that the Jedi is good, whereas in my mind, I'm like, Christian nationalism, Christian fundamental. Like, I went totally the other side, the dark side of it, and was like, no, you want to go and be on the dark side, because then you've broken free of, but I know that wasn't what he was going for, and I was totally going left. So I would love to hear y'all break down for me how this is supposed to be like an allegory for religion or faith that I keep hearing that it's supposed to be. Or is it not, and the diehards have taken it a place?
Well, so I see the Jedis more, and I think we kind of mentioned this last on the Woman King episode, right? But I see the Jedi more as like a warrior monk.
Oh,
Right.
So
They're
very
like
kind of
samurais, essentially.
very
kept that in
influenced by like Eastern philosophy, and the Force is supposed to be more like chi, right? That kind of like.
I kept saying this is
That
energy.
flow,
Okay.
right? And, I mean, you even hear, like Obi-Wan and other Jedis, you just feel it, right? Just concentrate, pay attention to your feelings. It's almost like be present.
Yes.
Right? So very kind of a Zen Buddhism approach, and that's how I've always seen that, to get away from that kind of Christian fundamentalism, Christian nationalism, because I think Luke does have this kind of messianic kind of figure hanging over his head, right? Where he is, in a sense, like a Christ-like kind of savior. And so I think some of that's in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think what you see throughout this trilogy explicitly is that both sides of the extreme are wrong. Where, I mean, so once you get to Empire and he meets Yoda, Yoda is so far on the quote-unquote good side of the Force that he wants, the whole idea of this warrior monk is to give up all trappings of humanity. Okay. And so Luke is the dividing line between that. So, when they're on Dagobah and Luke can feel his friends being, about to be, he can start to, he's becoming more in tune with the Force. He can start to see the future. And he asked Yoda, and Yoda was like, look, if you go back, you're going to ruin not only what they're doing, but you're going to ruin what you're doing as well. You're basically, you're changing this philosophy, which is, the what's the word I'm looking for? Not philosophy. It's the
like destiny. Or?
Yeah. What's the fucking term for prophecy? So the prophecy of there's going to be a chosen one. So this is the prophecy is there's a chosen one that's going to restore balance to the Force. So before this, basically what happens before Star Wars is that all of the Jedi have been wiped out except for two. Obi-Wan and they're really, when you say that, that's Jedi masters, people that are really, really on the good side of the Force. Because there's people, as
they also killed a bunch of kids too. So.
Yeah, in the timeline, I was like, this was dark for a period.
Well, the preceding war. So when we open up in Star Wars, the crawl says there's a civil war, which is kind of a misnomer. Because really what we're dealing with was rebel separatists, because the Empire is basically taken over. But there was a civil war in the prequel trilogy, and the person you see is the craggly old man in the robe in Jedi. That's Emperor Palpatine or Darth Sidious.
Yeah,
not Darth Sidious, but
Thank you for answering that, because I just was like, I think from the timeline, but I'm not sure because...
Right. So he was a politician who built up a clone army. Then they all look like stormtroopers, right? But there's this Order 66 that he had programmed in all of the clones. And so...
Except the Bad Batch, right?
Except the Bad Batch, yes.
See, I tried.
And so once Order 66 was put into place, all of the clones turned on their Jedi. That's how he was able to wipe out the Jedi. So now there's only two left, and Anakin has also killed all of the young Padawans and younglings that are the very, very bottom of the Jedi training thing. Okay. And so...
but we think Rosario Dawson's still alive.
Yes. Yeah, there's still some, and you'll find out the Force kind of exists as something that we can all tap into. We can't all be Jedis, but we can all be in tune with.
Well, are you sure about that? Does it depend on if you ask Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams? Or like Kevin Smith and the other fans that sort of like cried out for like a rewrite? Sorry, I have.
But the whole time I was like, I can see the influence of Star Wars on Avatar, on when we talk about like Buffy, The Matrix. Like I can see where themes here played heavily in those, and it makes sense because that's the next generation of directors and producers and writers who are definitely going to be influenced by that group who. Because of all the research I was doing, I had a photo pop up actually of like all the 70s, 80s directors at George Lucas's birthday party, I think.
Oh, nice.
And it was the whole crew. Even Ron Howard made it.
Yep. And cocaine was a guest, I'm sure, right? But
he was not in the photo.
But he was. This idea of like Lucas influencing Buffy, the Matrix Avatar, I think there's also a lot of Campbell's, Hero with 1,000 Faces in there as well, which Lucas claims to be influenced by that as well. And I say claims because I guess a lot of people around Lucas were like, he didn't read that book. He's just sort of appropriating that.
Right. The book cover.
But I mean, that theory that hero's journey that we get, especially from literature, you think Beowulf, it's all here as well, or King Arthur, right? It's all here as well. And it's all in Buffy, it's all in The Matrix. It's still there's a messianic figure that has to go on a journey of self-discovery and crisis, conflict, and everything else.
Yeah, because I truly kept thinking about how the scenes with Yoda, I get a little deeper with Avatar than definitely anything else. And the whole theory of Aang was, first of all, because he was supposed to die, but he wasn't what was needed at that time. Kara, the next series, Avatar, who's real feisty and she wants the war, whereas he's all peaceful. And I kept seeing that dynamic there, and that's when I really was like, I would love to see how much he's influenced other things, because I'm seeing, because even there was something that happened with the response. What are the creatures called that help Han Solo at the end?
The Ewoks? The fuzzy guys? The teddy bears?
Yes, the little teddy bears? Okay.
Ewoks.
Okay. But even that, I was like, very much Han Solo reminds me of The Mummy, the gentleman.
Brendan Fraser?
Yes, Brendan Fraser's character. And the way that he kind of embodied things and was able to turn people for him who technically wouldn't have been sometimes, or things like that. But the scene at the very end when they all come on top of the building and he slides in, and I was like, that right there was a Mummy directly.
Also was fun.
Can we take a step back?
Yes.
I did a huge mental just a breath in my head, because I was worried there for a minute. You were talking about Cameron's Avatar and not Avatar: The Last Airbender. I was like, thank God we don't talk about that.
No. I didn't. My family was like, we're not paying money to see that in theaters, so I didn't even see the first one in theaters. Hadn't seen the second one. Think I'm good. Definitely Last Airbender.
Excellent.
And I'm out. On like all of those. All of those. But that's no. I mean,
look, it's a big ask to get you into Last Airbender at this point. I mean, there's a lot of lore and series that you have to get through. So it's probably not going to be for you. But trust that it was not the Shyamalan version of it, but everything else was fun.
No,
and it is a shame though. He ruined it. It is a shame though that we can't ask you what your bending would be. That is a question I love, and asking teenagers, you learn a lot. The ones I was going to say, I think blood bending is dope. Is the ones you're like.
I kind of think my mind went to where a teenager's mind.
Eye on you, gotcha.
Finish the religion aspect? Was there more that you wanted to say about the? Because we kind of like.
Not really. I think it's one of the more interesting things to dig into, especially when you compartmentalize each of the three movies, because it gets convoluted as we go on either side of the original trilogy, and really because you're not dealing with just Luke at that point. Now you're dealing with the whole mythology, and you talk, and like when Han introduces it, he's like, I'm not interested in this ancient, this bullshit religion that you're talking about, right? And Obi-Wan and Yoda never really address it like that. And then you have Palpatine and Darth Vader, who are only using it because they can rule with power, and because it allows them to cheat death and to stay beyond beyond their years. And then Luke is trying to find out, because again, there's no real training montage for him at this point. There's really no guide. I mean, the only person is an ancient 900-year-old green little man who lives on the far-flung planet, hiding from the dark side so he doesn't cause any more issues. And and really the only reason that Obi-Wan is on Tatooine is so he can look out for Luke, right? He's placed there. He's living his life as a hermit just to make sure that nothing happens to this little boy. So for Luke to struggle, and obviously, normally when the reason that they don't want to train him is because he's obviously too old, and like that was the problem with Anakin, is they got him when he was 9, and so normally you got them when they were very much younger, and you took them right, and so you took them and you were able to then strip them of their, and quote unquote strip them of their human desires, so they had no desire for love or companion. I mean, the only thing that they knew was the Jedi Order, and that's what they were there to do, because they were protectors.
The 40 days and the...
Right. So Luke's kind of struggle with all of that and his journey, and then understanding how to balance the sides, which is what Luke was supposed to do. He was the chosen one. He was it wasn't so much about bringing balance to the good versus the bad. It was finding balance in the Force itself.
A yin and yang kind of thing,
right?
Which interesting, because there's always that conversation surrounding religion, and especially those so heavily embedded that they get in this world and they forget that the decisions or the beliefs that they have, the ripple effect, the impact that it really has outside of. And okay, so this helps me too. And as Luke is, and those guiding him are so worried about him balancing the Jedi, whereas the princess is like, but they're people, and her home planet is destroyed, and she watches that. And she has been with the rebels for so long and seen so many die, and so many attempts that have failed, whereas he has grown up on the farm and then comes into this. Okay, so I see the play on the isolation, and because I kept going back and being like, but why are there twins? What is now? This makes sense. This makes more sense. Okay.
Right. And so to also be fair, when Episode 4 came out, they weren't twins.
Right.
Oh, really?
Right. This is
there was a separate.
Right. So that was a storyline.
So the love triangle was originally the ploy.
Was a love triangle. Okay. Yes. Okay. It was very much a Harry Potter, Ron, and Harry and Hermione kind of.
I'm so over. Sorry. With YA literature now, you can't get a YA book without a love triangle. And at this point, I'm just like, y'all,
Well,
if there isn't a love triangle, they'll actually ban it from the library.
Pretty much. That's honestly that's a
so Lucas was looking for some reason for Luke to be angry enough to fight, because as a stoic monk, he wouldn't fight his father. Once he found out that Vader was his father, he wasn't going to fight him. He was going to try to bring him back to the good side without violence. He needed Vader to say something to Luke that would cause him to turn, to basically to react in anger. And so that's when Vader says, look, if you're not going to turn to the bad side, I'll find somebody who will. Maybe your sister will. That's when he goes after him.
Okay.
And so that was all, like I said, that was not when Star Wars was released, that was not a thing.
So in the moment, real life, when people are like, oh, they went from lovers to twins, what was the reaction of the fans and the audience? Was there I can't believe, or were y'all genius?
No, I think there was a lot of head scratching. I mean, just in general, wait a minute. But the moments where you kind of understand why Luke would be infatuated with royalty and richness, and she's beautiful,
and
right. And
has a mind of her own.
You have that whole Oedipal. You're attracted to. You've been separated, right? Yeah. You're attracted to what looks like you, essentially. And then so there's the kiss. There's some moments, brief, fleeting moments, and obviously he's attracted because he's trying to push.
There's male competition,
right?
Well,
yeah, he's telling Han Solo that she would never go for a guy, a rogue like him.
Han's an alpha, and Luke is. I mean, not when we first meet him. He's very much not, but he kind of wants to be.
Yes,
right.
Wants to be, and then you can see the change. You can definitely see it.
But so I don't think it was. It probably was talked about a lot. Obviously, there weren't internet circles back then. Right. But so once you find out that
as you were hopping to the pirate movie, y'all talked about it. Gotcha.
Right. Wait a minute. Remember that kiss they did?
Yeah.
So there was only really the
Blackbeard singing. Be quiet.
Right. There was only the real kiss in
Empire.
In Empire, when she's she calls him a scruffy nerf herder, and then she kisses.
You call him scruffy,
right? She kisses Luke, and then that's really about it. So luckily, he hadn't painted himself too much in a corner.
Yeah.
But it could have been. Yeah, it could have been. Had he have, I don't think. Obviously, they probably wouldn't have gone that route.
Interesting. And then because this kept popping in my head. It is a novel, so written, not Thankfully, they've never created a film or TV version of this, but it is The Blue Sword. It's a book and came out, I want to say 70s, 80s, the first publication of it. But I kept thinking throughout it, because I kind of was wondering if, this is how they're motivating him with the princess, now his sister, but he did love her, the feelings they keep telling her. And in that book, the main character is a woman, and she is purely motivated because she knows that she is more than they will have her be, that people think she is. And I get frustrated when I watch hero journeys that say there has to be a love interest or there has to be another motivation, because I've seen it done so well where it was purely someone saying, I know that there's more in me than the world thinks, and doing amazing things. And so finding that out, I'm actually kind of disappointed. But maybe, are there characters down the road, maybe daisies, that you kind of see somebody who's like, I'm here because I really do want to change the world, and I know I can?
Well, I think you see that in Luke, right? I mean, Luke's not really driven by the love of the princess. I mean, that's the story, is saving the princess. But Luke does have that sense of, look, he's good at being a pilot, right? He's got these things that he feels a calling. You see him on the desert, and he's looking out at the two suns, and he knows there's something better out there for him, that he's being held back by his aunt and his uncle. And then when these droids come along, and they are like, here's this guy. He jumps at the first opportunity to find adventure, and of course, it obviously immediately backfires because they're
immediately
burnt to death.
I mean, I was kind of like, in the 80s, they just showed the crisp bodies. Okay, cool.
Well, and people used to have sex in movies in the 80s too. They don't anymore.
That is true.
And they used to sweat. I mean,
the code. The reality has changed to what has been. But you're right. Thank you for reminding me. Even though I just watched that on Monday. How did I forget?
But yeah, I mean, it's clear that he has a kind of wanderlust, right? He wants to get out of it. He wants to find something, and he just doesn't.
Mercy. Well, I was like, is this dude here?
But I think that's something that makes him relatable too, is that we can all kind of go, I've been in that position where I've been, whether it's a job or a place or relation, whatever, right? Where you're like, there's something else. How do I find it? How do I get there?
And as soon as he talks to Obi-Wan for the first time, and he's like, well, I fought with your father. He's like, wait a minute, my father was something bigger than what I've been told, because they were trying to kind of squash this desire down in me. Not that again, he was brought to Tatooine as a newly born infant, so that he's never really known anything other than.
Did she die in birth?
She does.
Okay, so, I just wasn't sure, because that is not a funny topic. Sorry.
Dying in childbirth in a galaxy far long ago.
I wasn't sure if she was just on her own maybe planet and was coming later on in the series, or if she died in birth. I just knew that the decision had been made that they needed to be split, and they were split.
So what happens is Anakin is getting more and more in tune with the dark side. He's getting more and more corrupted. Padme, who's the mother basically, and she's Queen Amidala. She's royalty as well, which is why Princess Leia. Princess Leia is given to a royal family as well, but that's not so.
And they gave him the farmers.
But she has. Well, he had a brother, and that's where the Anakin was from. Anakin was from Tatooine as well.
That's his actual.
So those are his relatives, right? Anakin chokehold, does the Force chokehold on Padme and knocks her out, and doesn't kill her, but he thinks that he has. And so Palpatine basically, and I may be getting this wrong, but I think Palpatine tells them that going fully to the dark side, he can resurrect Padme. By that time, they've taken Padme off, and she's had the twins and dies in childbirth. When they do her funeral, they make it look like she's still pregnant, so that no one knows that she's had the baby.
How smart.
So Obi-Wan takes
clearly not that smart. It didn't work out.
Right.
So.
They tried. They tried.
So yes, they split the babies up. They promised to watch, but the person who's watching, the people who raised Leia obviously know all of this.
Yeah.
So they're there to watch after her. They give Anakin or Luke back to Tatooine, and Obi-Wan is hiding there, so no one knows that he's there, and so no one will look for, if in the off chance that someone senses the Force in these two.
Right.
That never happens, but But yeah, so the people who knew
is just crazy Ben.
Arturo and Chewbacca and Obi-Wan and Yoda were the only, and then Bala Organa was the only one that knows about the twins.
Okay. Thank you for that, because I kind of was like, oh, this is interesting, but how did we get here? They're touching on it, but I'm not. And I mean, I get it with something so expansive. There's a lot of places to drop hints, clues, and clarifications. I guess I do need this because of the press surrounding it. I think there's even dolls. Why is Baby Yoda in the future episodes and not the prequels?
That's a different Yoda.
That's not Yoda.
Different. Yeah, that's not Yoda.
Okay. So this one does, because I was like, do we just regenerate? Like, what is?
It's a different. I don't know what Yoda is.
Right. Yeah. No.
But it's a different one of those.
Oh, okay.
So technically, that thing's name is Grogu.
Yeah.
Who is procreating Yodas?
That's a good question. Okay. Yeah. One would assume, because you see other like Greedos and other like that this each species of people or of humanoids or whatever aliens that you see have multiples, because like you see Greedo, who's the guy who shoots at Han and is a bounty hunter, but then also when you get to Jabba's lair, there's a Greedo singer in his band kind of thing.
Yes.
So like,
and there are other huts. I mean, there are
huts,
like baby huts in the cartoons and stuff. So
okay, because I was like, but this two things. First, yes, the band scene. A little too much playtime and fun time happening in that writing room. Right. Because that scene popped up and I was like, but where are we? Even my dog was like, what is this?
I wonder if they wrote that in like Showbiz Pizza.
Because I mean, it was great. And then the second thing is, so does that mean that the Force can be found in all different types of life?
So the idea, once we especially get to the next trilogy, is that life, there are a lot of people who are Force adjacent, right? So this idea, again, of the chi that flows through all of us, that connects us all, we're all able to tap into it at a certain extent. The prequel trilogies tells you that there's this chemical within the body that would align you with being a Jedi, being able to be more prone to being a Jedi, and so whether that be a master or a grandmaster, what have you. And of course, Yoda was only one, but so we are all in tune to it. It's something that oversees and flows through all of us, but not everyone's going to be a practitioner of be a Jedi or Sith or
There is no meritocracy, and I say that and we laugh, but at the same time, I'm kind of serious about that, where it seems like there's this kind of rewritten thing of like, look, only certain people can actually go this far. Okay. And look, this to me aligns quite a bit with sort of what late stage capitalism that we find.
So that was very controversial too. So when he introduces the idea of midichlorians in The Phantom Menace, which is the thing that runs, which is you can scan for it, and if you have a high level of concentration of midichlorians, then you're more in tune to being a Jedi. This pissed off people to no end. Because the idea of like when every young boy and girl are playing with Star Wars toys, we can all be Jedis, right? We can all. This is what we all ascribe to.
And now it's like you have to do a blood test.
And this comes back in the post sequel trilogies, where Daisy Ridley in the second, in the Rian Johnson Last Jedi, we come to find out that she is nobody. Right? That her parents were drunks and they just abandoned her. But yet here she is, this like already very powerful whatever. And then people get pissed off about that, and then that gets rewritten in the final one. Which again, like, and so that drives me crazy, because there's this idea that no, we can all we can tap into this, we can do this, we can.
That's the basis.
I mean, what's the American lie? We can, if we work hard enough, we can be anything.
Yeah, it's gold through your veins, not the streets. So we have Daisy, and because you were kind of tapping into the next question I had. In the prequels, are there any women Jedis?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because
there's like two.
There's a whole order. There's a whole. Now there are female different species. I don't believe there's any female human Jedis.
Okay, so
but there
Daisy
are female
is kind
Jedis.
of like the first.
Well, so again, once Luke tries to start the Jedi Order back up again.
I saw that mentioned in the
and then it doesn't go well for him. So it kind of
I kind of gathered that.
But yes. In the prequel trilogies, there's an entire Jedi Order. There are tons of Jedi. They're all different, and they're all different ranks. So there's Jedi. There's Jedi Knights, which are basically after you're a Padawan, you're a Jedi Knight. Okay. And if you then come to train, and one of your Padawans becomes a knight itself, then you become a Jedi Master. Okay. Now, Anakin never became a Jedi Master, but he was allowed on the council through some vote. And anyway, so there's a Jedi Order.
Real politics, right?
Right. So there is a council order that kind of oversees all Jedi things, and then Yoda kind of sits atop of all of them as the Grand Master, who they come to him like he's the one who's kind of deciding where this religion goes, right? And he's like the Joseph Smith of Jediism. Okay,
no, this is kind of like it's the one that Amazon. It was a book, and then now it's a TV show, The Circle, or it's the one that Gone Girl Gone. That the redhead in that movie plays the main on this. It's they had one season, but all that to say is they too have a council. They have divisions, and they do have a High Lord, but it's all women. And the power, if the power is found in a man, it will corrupt the man. And
right. I'm with that.
So they try to make.
Yeah. Okay. I know what you're talking about. Yes.
It was just.
It will drive them insane.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
It will destroy them. Yeah.
And now there's one that they're having to find because Ragor or something like that is coming back.
There's a bad guy.
Yeah, and he got the power, but it kind of seems along the same lines. Again, influences across, and that was one of those things that came out kind of while we were all still locked in the house. And then when people had options to watch other things.
But those books were really popular.
Yes.
Too. I had people mention that. I had no idea what they're, because I think the guy that wrote them passed away.
Yes.
And he at fairly young age.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but these books, but again, encompassing that hero's journey, because look, even though the women are kind of all powerful, look whose fucking story is being told. It's the guy's, hero journey.
Well, there's not that many of those out there. You really need to tell from the perspective that
you're right. You're right. There are not very many male hero journeys, especially white male hero journeys. I think it's important that we sort of highlight these whenever possible.
Also, though, it's fantasy, so race is a construct.
Race is a construct in Star Wars too.
I'm not gonna lie. When Billy D. Williams showed up, I was like, "Oh, okay, Lando, look at you."
And I'm pretty sure he was shilling for Colt 45 in the episode.
Okay. Also was trying, but not sure. I was like, I don't know. Who knows? But that's what it felt like. I gathered that too. Okay.
Janet Maslin, the critic for the New York Times, did not like his character because she thought that it was too much of a stereotype that he was, and she uses this kind of term in her review. This isn't my language, but she says there's way too much jive.
Oh, interesting.
And what she means,
period of black film,
right? Where
that's what you were actually having.
But I think if you have one black character and hey, be Shaft or be be sweet badass, be somebody like that. Don't be something different. Be that everyone knows. That's kind of safe.
Be that, but also in this world, the person that is friends with Han Solo, who is doing what they do in the smuggling, is not going to be, for lack of better reference, Bill Cosby's Cosby Dad. I know, the character that had the family and was just the good guy. I'm trying in my head. But all the 70s guys were just, because even all of them.
Well, I think Maslin's point was he had it turned up to, or they had it turned up to 11, and maybe it didn't have to be so kind of unctuous.
Do you think Billy D brought that to the table though? Because that's kind of everything.
That's kind of his vibe,
right?
anyway,
I mean,
right?
It's like Samuel L. Jackson,
right?
You're gonna get,
but you don't get that from him in the prequels.
Oh,
look, it's toned down quite a bit,
right? But I think that was the point. I mean,
true.
Look,
true.
I think Billy D is a real cool cat, and I think that he was cool in this movie in Empire.
right.
I just think it's interesting that a critic noted that at the time. Was like, wait, you're gonna have one black character, and
This is how you're gonna do
this
it.
is how you're gonna portray it. So,
And
I
also,
mean,
well, and again, she didn't have the foresight of seeing Jedi, but I mean, you see Lando's arc throughout the story,
Okay.
and also even in Jedi.
But doesn't he betray? According to the timeline, it said.
Well, he doesn't have any choice. So like, he has
but
to-
in
and he
Jedi,
also-
he's gained kind of stature and status within
the Rebel Alliance, right?
Right,
So
okay.
so he's running Cloud City,
Yes.
and
Which seemed pretty cool.
Right. I mean, yeah, he's basically this huge like outpost for trade. It's
It's a
peaceful.
mining operation, too.
Right.
Where are they-
It's like it sits on both sides, so
I had
it's
that
not
question.
it's not politically aligned with any sort of with any side. Right. He's not harboring separatists, but he's also not in pocket of the Empire. But when the Empire pulls up with their fleet, there's no other choice. And he also thought he made the best deal he possibly could for
but thank
Han.
you, because I thought that I was like, they're saying he betrays, but like they were gonna do what they wanted to do, and he kind of played the game, which you kind of get. I've heard in the other side of it, or maybe it's the prequels. In the prequels, you get to see a young Lando and Han.
There's a solo movie.
Oh, okay.
Donald Glover.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
So, I mean, he comes good.
Lando had no choice,
Right.
and like knowing that the Empire and Darth Vader were on their trail, the best thing that he could do was to basically allow the Empire to come there, take what they needed to take. But he also got double crossed by the Empire as well.
Yes. Okay. I mean, I kind of going back to what got us here, though. It's weird how fantasy, not weird, it's expected how fantasy still follows the rules of the society that we actually exist in and insists on upholding that, despite the fact that it's like, you have a fucking elf.
Right.
That elf can be dark skinned, and you not have to ever say that they're dark skinned because it's an elf.
Right.
And this is interesting about science fiction and fantasy, because I think what those genres do best is turn a reflection of our world back to us and lets us see it in a different way that makes us go, oh shit, that's fucked up. Okay, oh right, what's happening next door is messed up. But yeah, there really is no then excuse to not have a wide variety of people in these types of movies, TV shows, right? Because yes, the elf can be black, and there's no reason to be mad about that, right? Or
you have a green thing too,
right? Like, because elves don't really exist. It's okay. So yeah, I mean there is a line there now, unless the showrunners, unless the Lucases of the world are trying to make a concerted point about society and race, then I think that becomes a different conversation. But I don't think he is, and I don't think like the Lord of Rings TV show was trying to either.
That's true, and I know that they got a lot of slack. Even I just was learning.
Well, and like, why did we get upset about a black stormtrooper? Like, look,
people got upset about that.
yeah, and it's like, look, they wear helmets. Like, how do you know?
About to say, I thought that was actually a very good way to be like, you don't know what's behind this. It's because they're in their stormtrooper gear the whole time. And so I thought, though, I just went down the rabbit hole because I learned that, and it makes sense, having read so much, that a lot of people are like, oh, y'all are taking away all of our redheads. And other people are like, y'all know that black people can have red hair, right? And they're like, yeah, but they're not natural, that they're actually picking for the role. And finally, in the podcast that I was watching, the woman was like, I just need you to say you don't want black people to play these roles, because we're not going to keep doing the back and forth. And she's like, with that said, though, a lot of things that were being written from the 40s all the way through the civil rights movement, 80s, are black coded in redheads, because society has always had some differing opinions about redheads.
And the Irish.
Yeah, and so they were like, we can mirror without directly saying black. And one they said specifically was in the DC Universe Fire, I think, as they were like, without a doubt, she's written as black. But because of the way that things in production, you make her white. And then when HBO gets the ownership over, they put her black in the writer's room, and that's the way the TV show is. She's black. And so I was like, oh, this is interesting, because now you go back and you're like, oh, where do I see the redheads popping up? Where do I see the paler, maybe Irish, the accents in the elves or something where they're saying they're from kind of thing popping up? Because then you're right, this writer's making a specific critique likely, and there's another layer to what I'm engaging with.
But in 2023 you can just make them black.
There's that.
Sure, yeah. And one would think, right, is that once the stormtroopers were no longer clones, and that all kinds of species would have been stormtroopers, right? I mean, it wouldn't have just been, because they would have just used them as you know,
cannon fodder.
Right, exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there are, parallels and visual parallels to the Empire and to, Nazism and the Third Reich, right? But I mean...
Okay, yes. Okay, I was wondering, but I was like, again, I don't know. There's a lot here.
There's a lot of Nixon stuff in there as well. I mean, this was in part a response to the Vietnam War and Nixon running again for a second term. And
okay.
Yeah, so I don't think he was really I mean, aside from I think the visuals and what he saw in Triumph of the Will, and that was kind of obviously influenced what he was doing from an Empire perspective. But at no point do you ever really find out that the Empire is anything other than just this kind of evil dictator fascist ship that exists over and wants to rule with an iron hand. Really, there's no genocidal aspect to the Empire that we know of anyway,
other than Jedis.
Right, but that's not but that's just an order of monks. I mean, it's a few hundred people. That's fine.
What must be done?
Is there a definition of genocide, though, that is more about mass numbers of similarities rather than specific ethnicities?
I don't know. I don't know the actual definition of what falls into genocide and what's not. Light genocide, heavy genocide.
So what I mean is...
but I think that's really good, because I think that likely, we don't know because we know there's so much in history that's been lost, but likely there is just I just need to get rid of all of this. I don't care what you subscribe to, what your cultural, you're in my way. Yeah, you're in my way. And I mean, probably, honestly, one of the most solid we can confirm examples would probably be when during colonization, specifically the Belgium, when they're going through the interior of the continent of Africa, and they're like, we don't care what tribe you are.
Right.
We are obliterating you.
Right.
That might be... as far as they're concerned, you're all in the same.
Is there an intent behind genocide? Because the Empire does blow up in a couple of planets, actually.
Right, and that's what I mean.
Which should be, honestly, I was like, that's an entire planet.
Yeah.
But cold, okay.
Yeah, and if you watch Rogue One, it's not exactly a easy, quick death. It's not like an instantaneous zapping.
They show you later on how this goes down?
Yeah. So there's a standalone prequel to A New Hope called Rogue One, which is about the people stealing the plans to the Death Star.
So it sits in between the prequel trilogy and then our OG trilogy.
Okay.
And that's how Leia got the plans to then put into
I was wondering, honestly, the whole time, how did Layla carry out this mission, but yet she's not the focus of the movie?
This is interesting, too, because, I mean, there's another movie where she is the one who goes on this journey and becomes...
It's weird to me, looking back on it now, that the Rogue One story wasn't included. I know you're talking all about Luke here, but at least some, the Crawl could have been. I mean, I know that's a little bit about the Crawl kind of is the Rogue One story but it also talks about the Civil War and sets up the Separatists versus the Empire. There is a big story about there's an evil entity here that we stole these plans from, and that.
And also, in A New Hope, they use destroying Leia's planet as a test for the Death Star too, don't they?
I think it's a display of power because no one's seen it yet.
Okay.
Because they do blow up the planet.
Right, in Rogue One. But I mean, also is that sort of like kind of, retconning the...
I saw the Leia thing as they were desperate at this point.
Yeah.
And also... Yeah. Because they didn't know what was going to happen with those plans. They needed those plans back. And so this was going to be their only method of like really keeping control over the galaxy, right?
Okay.
And so they had to put the screws to Leia the only way that they knew how to put the screws to her.
It's pretty drastic.
I know, right?
I mean, that's pretty drastic.
No, he even said, he was like, I told you she's not going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And I kind of was like, I feel that he was going to do that anyways, but damn, a whole planet. But is it that kind of ruthless throughout the entire timeline?
How do you mean?
In the sense that in kind of going back even to the genocide, in the pursuit of power, control of the Jedi, or the Jedi being so darkly influenced into these leaders that people are willing to do whatever it takes, no matter what that is.
Yeah, I mean, there's no quarter.
Right.
I mean, with Vader, with the Empire, there is no, okay, we're going to take prisoners here. It's usually just...
Yeah, even just the torturing of Han Solo when he was like, they didn't even ask me questions. I was like, my goodness. Oh, okay.
That is, yeah.
Okay. So that it's kind of steady. Because, I mean, I know that he's in Better Call Saul, and he was in Breaking Bad. Giancarlo
Esposito.
Yes. I know him from Spike Lee joint. But, he's now in one of the later sequels, and
he's in the Mandalorian.
Yes, and his children apparently were like, oh, we can't believe you're doing this. And he's like, listen, I'll kill whoever I want. And he's like, I got a character for them. And I was like, oh, okay, so... all right, this is just a trend that you see. Okay.
Yeah, I think it helps tell the story, right? In very stark terms of black and black, of good and evil, black and white. It's just
it's such a binary opposition.
Right.
Film.
It's simplistic in the sense that just like Buck Rogers was and Flash Gordon was, is that it's easy to tell that story without having to get into the intricacies of and he does throw Han Solo in there, right? As Han Solo is the roguish element that kind of plays both sides of it.
He's the gray area, right? He's the nuance.
But from an Empire perspective, they are power at all costs.
Okay.
And those who and you see that through basically all of the movies and all the people that come in to try to get into the leadership.
Although, I mean, we say like black and white and simplistic, but we do know, again, going back to who I just mentioned, King Leopold with the Belgium, even examples that we've seen closer to our timeline of people who power corrupts power kind of are, and that's where they are. I had a moment we're about hour and a half, 2 hours ago, finished, and I was like, I can see though, should I have children, I will sit down with them with this film. This is a very good way to have conversations about good, evil, life, morals, humanity, how we show up for each other, what drives us. This is a really good, just these three alone, where you could have some really good topics and conversations, and they can understand it even at 7 years old, what is being portrayed, and go in depth as far as they can, give them new language, teaching film kind of thing.
Yeah, these are simple but bangers. I mean, there's nothing complicated really about these movies, at least on the surface. So it's easy just to go. That's kind of the thing that struck me when I was watching them again for this. I was just like, and I've seen them, I don't know how many times, right? But like, just kind of trying to watch it with a more critical eye. It's just like, this is such a, like, it's just so well contained. The plot, especially New Hope, is just like bang, 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 and it's so good. Yes, Luke is whiny as shit in the first, third of that movie, and so that's when you're not a kid anymore. Really, you're just like, holy God.
He was always whiny though.
It was bad. But once
he was an only child, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, and
on the farm.
Whatever.
Sure,
parents got killed. Fine, right? But
blue milk will do that to you.
It's true.
He didn't know any better. He didn't have a sibling to just pop him upside the head occasionally.
And so, he was just the only excitement that he had was shooting womp rats. I mean, from his land speeder, right?
No one knows what a fucking womp rat is.
One of those little things that Lucas added 20 years later.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
I kind of now want to go find the Reddit thread that's all the things that have been added. I'm sure it's pages and days and.
Yeah. I mean, mostly think about like it really. Any sort of like side visual flair was added. Any sort of like where it looks like it's a CGI monster, like that. There's a couple of where the sand troopers are riding, beasts. Yeah. All of that's added.
Okay.
And then it's mostly just color correction on shots and things like that. But the Jabba scene where Han talks to Jabba at outside in Alderaan.
Yeah.
That wasn't in the movie. They cut it out completely because Jabba was just a guy in a suit. They couldn't put that. And so when you see Jabba in Return, right, he just sits on his throne, right?
Okay.
He's an animatronic thing rather than...
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
and then, isn't in one of the sequels, Jabba's child is actually like in human form?
That might be in one of the animated things.
Oh, animated. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a Clone Wars movie that came out that had a lot more Jabba stuff in it, and then that led into the animated series. And I'm not 100% sure anymore. This has become so unwieldy at this point to keep up with it all. It's just like, and it even was back in 77 through the original trilogy, because by that time, then you spawned comic books and other novelizations, and there's a whole like other group of like the novelizations go so far to tell stories outside of the Han Solo and Luke realm. I mean, they've developed their own characters and things like that. And there's just like there are with Star Trek and everything else. There's just hundreds and hundreds of them. So it'd be impossible to like, unless you spent all your time just digesting it, it'd be impossible to do it all.
I did one thing that, speaking of how we see mirrors in other films, movies, is the isolation of the hero. And I think it's so interesting that, again, with heroes, males, you're going to get the isolation and they're loved by their family and they're really good at all of these things. But when you go on the female hero journey, it is wholly her versus society. And the fact that she is not willing to bend to what society specifically wants of her. And I always think that's so interesting because they aren't isolated. They're very much on display. And their journey then becomes very much for everybody to be a part of.
And to comment on.
Yes. Whereas with the males, you get to go join Yoda and whatever that little cavern was that he had and eat whatever was in that pot. And no one witnesses your
like
failures.
Gumbo they've been cooking for 3 days, probably.
When he like threw some seasoning on there, I was like, okay. I don't think that did anything, but whatever, enjoy. But privately, he's failing. Whereas you don't see that. And I just thought that was really, again, a thing that's interesting. I guess I'm kind of, again, I'm at that point where I'm like, I want more. I want y'all to start pushing yourselves creatively as directors, producers, writers. Stop giving us the same and see what you can tap into. But I also recognize in the 70s and 80s, this was a big deal. And he really gave something that my dad said him and all his siblings went, and their age range is vastly different, but that was like a big thing for them. My mom was like, I mean, yeah, I went. It is what it is. It was good. We enjoyed it, but it's something that he was excited that I was doing this. He's excited to talk to me about it. He's going to be disappointed, but it is one of those that I think it was right for that time, but we're here now in 2023 and I want more.
And something to go back to that time, I do think Lucas lets himself and Carrie Fisher down in Return of the Jedi by putting her in that gold bikini and kind of displaying her next to... because you don't see that anywhere, up until that point. And I understand that that's who kind of Jabba is, right? And he's got these dancing girls that he like throws into the pits and watch them get eaten and stuff like that. But again, like, did we have to do that? and display her that way. And I understand that Carrie Fisher is attractive, and that, you know, and she did pictures for Rolling Stone and stuff afterwards in that same bikini.
Oh, that's right, she did.
But again, like, here we are, we're putting her up on display, objectifying her, and seeing her. How is she going to get out of this jam?
And she did.
Right.
That scene where I was like, my goodness.
Yeah.
She said, "You're dying or I'm dying." Those are the options here.
But I think this other idea about, like, we want more, I think you're right. We still want more. And I think this feeds into this sort of fan obsession or fandom sort of dictating what comes what gets sort of portrayed in some of these films. But also we're sort of embarking on this, like, monoculture where we have Star Wars and we have these big pieces of IP, and that's all we're really throwing in the market, really, or those are the most successful ones. And then those are the ones that get, you know, hey, we got to be in fan service. We got to do this. And you know what? This is what they want. They want Tony Stark to go on his hero journey.
Yes.
Pepper Potts is fine, right? She's got some good lines, whatever.
Even when you get to the Black Widow, her film in that whole universe, it's
Florence Pugh's the hero there.
Yep. I mean, she is.
She is everywhere.
As she is everywhere on this podcast.
Talk about someone's career that I'm already in love with.
She's part of the Puletarian. Welcome to the Puletarian.
Oh my gosh. Whatever she gives, I'm like,
just don't watch A Good Person.
Please stay away for all
Don't watch that.
Okay.
She's going to be in plenty of other stuff coming up.
I mean,
falling over her, and we always have Lady Macbeth. So.
I will defend the Leia decision, I think, a little bit, because I do think that ties into, I do think the arc there, like her killing Jabba and her being the one who saves Han, tells the story that
which I didn't like.
Is that she's the one who leads that, right? She's the one who puts herself in danger, and she's willing to do anything to save her friend and the person that she loves, and she's able to do that, right? I mean, so I get the idea that it's a little dehumanizing.
But they still need Luke to come in.
Yeah, they need. They need
sort of like
no. I'm with you. They need everybody, really.
Right.
I mean,
I can see it kind of even. Jabba is not the Empire. The Empire has structure. They have rules about how they kill, even if we're like, that is a rule. Jabba is the degenerate of it.
Right. He kills that. He kills the singer. I mean, and the dancer with
for sport.
For fun, and is like laughing about it, and it's even like it's almost comical to him because he kind of stumbles and pushes her accidentally into the pit. So yeah, having Leia kill him at the end. Bikini aside, I do think that it gives. I think Leia's role in this, even though it's not the focus, is a strong. I think it's ultimately a positive portrayal for young girls to watch this movie and to see someone who. How
funny, because as you were talking, I was literally thinking. Also, George Lucas is no dummy, and he knew his big audience was boys, teenage boys.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. But also, he ties in. I mean, she leads the Rebel Alliance essentially. I mean, she's the one in Empire dictating when we're getting off of Hoth and when we're doing, and how everyone looks to her and takes orders from her. Not from Han, not from Luke.
Right. Even when we're introduced to the Ewoks, the teddy bears, Han is like, I got it, y'all hide. And that goes left. But she's the one who runs out, jumps on, and is actually driving this vehicle and telling him where to shoot, where they're located, what to kind of do. And again, I even at that point, though, I kind of was like, how am I watching Luke's story? And we've got this badass female here. But I do, from what I'm kind of saw in the timeline, there is respect to her, who she actually was as Carrie, and the fact that Luke and Han don't maybe have such great deaths, but Carrie gets peaceful kind of death. And then I don't know if y'all do spoilers.
No, it's no,
we don't.
If we're talking about it on the podcast, we assume.
Okay.
Yes, no worries.
And then, but also in their child, because Han and the princess's child, I know he kind of has his own arc and whatnot, but you can see her fierceness in him from the things that I kind of read. So I can feel it, and I can see both sides. I guess I just really at the end am like, why that? Couldn't it have just been a like sheer robe or something? I don't know. Like
no, this is. I think this is what happens because I think we're all like. She's such a good character, right? She's not just your stock damsel in distress. I mean, yes, she is in some ways a damsel in distress, but I mean, so is Luke at certain points too. So she has enough agency, enough power, right? Enough gusto. I mean, she does not put up with shit from anybody. And so like this is really great, and it is a kind of powerful role model for young girls to look at. But then there's this, why can't we have more of that?
Right.
Like why couldn't we just have kept going with that rather than that? So there's always that. I think that kind of urge or impulse.
Yeah.
Give me that movie.
Because I even think like Han. I know it's portrayed that Hans came back because Luke and he saved him and he admires him and you spoke to me at the end, but I firmly think he comes back because the princess calls him on it, and it's like,
for sure.
For sure, terrible.
Yeah.
And also because he's like, hey, I'm Hans, I've conquered a lot, let's see if this one, and it's not.
And I really like the moment in Empire Strikes Back where Han is one like, I know you like me. I know you like me. Just admit it. She's like, no, get out of here. Right? Where she's like, look, I have more important things than this budding romance. And
which I think is very true. I've always said if we're in a zombie apocalypse,
there's no
don't
time
come to me for procreating. I'm chilling, sad that I'm having to eat things out of the can and sleeping. That's it.
Right. And so I love that kind of like role reversal as well, where he's the one just like, just you need to kiss me right now. And she's like, fuck off, man.
Was she received like that, though, when they first came out in the 70s and 80s? Was her character Princess, was it?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so. That'll be,
Sorry to keep referring to you as my time.
Again, he's clearly the one more steeped in Star Wars lore. He's also older.
So when there were actual Nazis,
well, that was the Errol Flynn joke that he clearly like didn't get earlier, right?
It just reminded me of that Judy Dench clip where she's like, back in the war, and the interviewer's like, "What war?" And she's like, "How old do you think I am?"
But also, as we've discussed on this podcast, this would have been around like second wave feminism.
Yeah, that's very true.
So we would have. So I mean, again, it's not an accident that it's also sort of a white woman of upper class who is being shown as powerful and in a way emancipated.
There was one other woman. She came in the last film. I really saw her, where she delivered some news about what the things were happening, and I was like, ooh, I want to know more about her because I haven't seen any other women, kind of thing. But I mean, I also understand that, as we said at the beginning of this conversation, George Lucas was having fun.
Yeah.
Like, he was playing around. He knew what he kind of wanted to do. And through probably others, Carrie herself even, being like, let me help you with the writing.
Well, and I think, he has the storyline, that is in his head. But the editing for the first Star Wars was done mostly by his wife. She cut it and really made it what it was. When George showed it, it was all over the place. He turns over duties to direct an Empire and Jedi, which he doesn't do ever again. He also doesn't write the script. Lawrence Kasdan writes the script for
and Lee Brackett, who's a woman who was really known for her kind of quick, sharp dialogue. Yeah. And I mean, did come on, the Bogart movie, the Bacall Bogart, the fucking Big Sleep.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. God.
You're cursing at me before you've given me any details. Come on, you know that fucking movie I'm talking about? The one that's got that one guy in it?
Shut up.
I think she also did one of Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn's.
Okay.
I think she also, and you're right.
But she was a very well renowned.
Yeah.
So I think the stars aligned there a little bit for Leia, and it wasn't just and I think it wasn't, not to take anything away from Lucas, but he had other people in his court that were helping dictate a lot of these characters.
Listen, as we've talked and I've learned, I think that one thing, and maybe the fandom will probably disagree with me on this, is that Lucas is definitely a God bless the child.
For sure. Yeah.
Just, like you said, the stars aligned. He had the right people in the right places. He was at the right time. But even just in how I'm hearing people, things that have, the way he listens to the fandom, I'm not saying he got lucky, But I'm saying, again, God bless the
He made
child.
some really smart decisions on how the profits got split.
Right.
Because Fox didn't think the first film was going to do
merchandising.
anything.
Yeah.
And so he set up another company to do all the merchandising. He wrote a contract where he got
he knew what his skill set was.
Like 50% of profits at this point and then 77% at this point. And so basically after A New Hope, he didn't have to work like ever again.
Right.
Okay.
And then he goes into kind of a Cameron mode where he's just developing technology at this point. And then so to say that, I think and it's weirdly kind of a parallel to Cameron because Cameron's not good at telling stories either.
Right.
But great at developing technology. Is that what he's able to lay the groundwork with for Industrial Light and Magic then defines film for the next 4
And that
decades.
was almost, and he did that almost by necessity because Fox didn't have a special effects unit. So he's like, oh, I have to do this. I have to make my own thing in order to make my vision.
I mean, as y'all are saying this, I'm like, oh, he's actually a good decision maker. He's someone who knows how to assess a situation, like you said with the first showing where he's like, it's a mess. Here, take
and
this.
apparently can delegate, right? And accept help because De Palma wrote the scroll for New Hope, because he showed it to him first, and De Palma was like, "This is shit. Here, let me do this for you."
But it does take a big person to say, in order to get to where I want, who are going to be the people to help me get there.
And see, I think that's what the bad word on the prequel trilogy was. Is that he couldn't step out of the way.
Oh, the ego had gotten there.
Right. So he's now this, this world builder, this God builder. He directs all three. He writes all three, and they're messes.
Listen.
I mean, all of his
Him and Tyler Perry stuff and stuff, please.
All of his bad influences, all of his bad decisions are there on the screen, and the direction is like someone who understands the beauty of the special effects, but has no idea what comes across in the actual dialogue or the acting performances. So again, when you have someone like Liam Neeson or Ewan McGregor who can kind of overcome, like when people saw the trailer for Phantom Menace, people lost their fucking minds.
I remember. I do actually remember that one.
People thought this was going to be...
Because I love Natalie Portman.
Yeah, I know. And so do we. Yeah,
yes, very much so.
Okay, cool.
Very much so.
Wouldn't it be cool if they were both in a movie together, Natalie and Florence?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I'd be into that. I'd be into that. Just not a Zach Braff film.
No.
But when that came out, when that dropped, that was like a thing that, like, I mean, we are just talking about burgeoning internet as well.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this is 98, 99,
Yes.
and so like people are downloading it, watching it again and again. Like, they're just going crazy. People are standing outside theaters for months ahead of time to see this. And of course, granted, there's a 16-year build up between people who lived their entire lives as Star Wars fans, played with every single toy. That was another thing that was genius about Lucas, is that every character you see, every starship you see, every play set, every scene that you see as a play set, you can take that home and remake that movie shot for shot.
I've seen this.
Using
even
the toys.
the Legos, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a whole thread of the dad. I'm going to repost it when we put this out there. He, for his wedding, he's like, I want to get the Empire, the Star Wars set. And his wife was like, oh, I mean, and so he promised he would wait until his sons or his children were old enough and he'd do it with them. So 10 years later, he waits, his two boys, I think one was 4, the other 6, they sit down to build it together over days, and he keeps everybody updated on Twitter. But how many people then went out and bought that?
Oh, of course. And that's been nonstop since '77, essentially. So
Genius.
So it's just that's how it's lived on. People had Empire Strikes Back bed sheets, and
it's wild how capitalism makes us wily and get creative and smart to keep people hooked.
Well, and it was crazy because it had never been done before. Like, it never ever been done before. So like, no one had ever thought of marketing a movie like that. There had been big blockbusters before Star Wars that came out, but no one had actual action figures. And now, like, every movie tries to do that. Now, they don't I don't know if they do it so much anymore, like, where it's just a deluge of, like, every character. But, I mean, like, you'll see dead toy lines that were from movies that they just thought were going to hit, like Battlefield Earth or things like that, where they pushed all these toys out and then the movie completely flops and no one wants them and they sit somewhere. Even like the Independence Day toys were bad because they were just bad toys.
Yeah.
But
no, I remember this.
They go to the island of misfit toys. There's a place for them.
Sadly, probably melted down to one that will sell.
Nobody wants a Charlie in the box.
But you're right. Like 16 years, that means a parent, an older sibling, a younger sibling, whole family is now going.
Yeah, like I went to the movies with my little brother, and we're 11 years apart.
Yeah, I mean, and there was such a huge build a year before that movie comes out. People know it's coming because everyone had gone back, and the re-releases of the special editions did really well. I think, all of them made over $100 million in the box office just re-releasing, right? And so we've got a year build up to talking about this thing. You've got Taco Bell and all these other places starting to put out promotional materials.
And
everyone's
souvenir
ready,
glasses,
right?
and
it's. That movie makes a ton of money, but the crush of, oh shit, this is not very good.
But people kept coming back because there's 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, so
you keep hoping.
Okay.
It is the old hope.
That's
right?
That's why episode 4 is called A New Hope. You sat through these. Here you go.
Well, so the first one's a little kid Anakin, right? And you're like, okay, well maybe they're jettisoning that, and we're gonna get into maybe something's gonna be better.
The Force is
by the time you see the second one, and they do diminish in money from episode 1 to 3. They don't make as much. But
some people just put their foot down. They were like, I can't do this.
And at a certain point, you're like, well, fuck it. I've seen all 5 of them. Might as well see the 6th one, right? It's just a matter of, I'm gonna be a completist, and I can't not hear how the story ends, right? Right. But yeah, it was one of those things. And also, I think a lot of times people in Phantom Menace, you go back and maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. You try to convince yourself that something you wanted so much to be good and wanted so much to be game changing, and it was really just so disappointing that you're like, all right, well,
because I did that after I rewatched these for this. I was like, I'll watch the prequels.
Mistakes were made.
I got a half an hour in. As soon as Jar Jar Binks shows up in episode 1. I was like, this is silly. This is okay.
See, we're jumping ahead 16
years. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know.
No,
you got 16 years to come back.
I was going to say, this is just wild because the way y'all described it to me, I'm hooked. I want to see it.
Okay.
But I know that I am the same way. I probably would only make it about 30 minutes before I'm like, and no.
It's weird.
Vera, putting you back on.
All of the seemingly right choices that George made with kind of towing the line with caricatures and potentially going too far for obviously showing a diverse cast of aliens, doing the same thing, but also then leaning into stereotypes, which was really bizarre. You'll see in. You saw in Greedo, right? Mm-hmm. He speaks a different language and it's subtitled, right? There's certain areas where we don't know what anybody's saying. R2-D2's not. You don't know what he's saying.
I'm not going to lie. It took me to movie 3 to be like, turn some subtitles on. Surely they're translating at this point something. But you're right. I never know what Arturo says.
Right. So Jar Jar Binks, and I'm sure you've heard, it was played by a Jamaican actor, Ahmad Best, and it was very much almost in Step and Fetch It kind of.
It
was
that reviewer was definitely on his heels for that one.
Yeah, and then there's a shopkeeper named Watto who has a very Jewish affectation.
Mm-hmm. I've actually read of this because in Men in Black, when they put Tony Shalhoub as they referred to that.
Yeah, so there were just things that were just missteps, and then the comedic relief that you got with C-3PO and Arturo is done with an unlikable character in Jar Jar Binks, and so all of the childishness it's just ramped up and looks ugly, right? So there's a scene where he gets his tongue electrocuted, and he's always been kind of a Laurel and Hardy fan, like a Three Stooges, these Looney Tunes type of roles. But he steps in Banta poop, and it's just dumb. And then your main protagonist is no longer a young man; it is a 9-year-old boy, and so he's not compelling, right?
Right.
His story's being told for him.
Yeah.
And so that's the huge misstep is thinking that we give a shit about baby Vader. where if you had Hayden Christensen, had you had the prequel arc be over 6 years rather than 13 that it is, then maybe this makes more sense. Maybe it's a little less, but you get, I'm going to be a Jedi wee. That's a line in Phantom Menace. I'm going to be a Jedi wee. And so like this, and this poor kid gets.
I'm sorry, I'm just kind of like,
Right. I mean, like, why not follow the same arc you did with The New Hope? Right.
Luke is 19, right? Because he's been, and so 19 to 22. You don't need it to be this huge, long thing. Now, granted. And so you've kind of painted yourself in the corner with the Clone Wars because the Clone Wars did last 3 years. But okay, so who cares how old Vader is when he becomes Vader?
Right. I mean,
it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at all.
Right.
Because he's also like mostly robot at this point.
Right.
I mean, right. He's
So,
being kept alive by artificial or different technology. So it doesn't matter.
So there was
someone out there's like, it does matter.
I was
telling you why.
I was like, there's somebody in the fandom who's like,
and so there was just too much to overcome, and there was too much to forgive, and then so that set the tone. And then by the time you get to Hayden Christensen, which is in the next movie, and he's starting to fall in love with Padme, and they've got to keep their relationship secret, but Lucas, so all the stuff where you didn't see love and how it was handled in the original trilogy gets handled like a young adult novel, but even less in this. They're lying around in fields and they have these really long soliloquies about sand and how he hates sand. All of it
I've
is.
seen that meme and never understood it.
Yeah.
But now that you're explaining it to me, I'm like, oh, I get it now.
And there's zero chemistry between
and
Christensen
Lucas
and
is like,
Portman.
this is how teenagers talk, right?
Right.
Oh, mercy.
Yeah, he's lost his American graffiti cred for sure.
Right.
Oh, this sounds terrible. But again, I can also see the potential of it with the right writers.
Right. Yes, it needed the right writers, and it honestly needed a different director.
Okay.
Right. I mean, like Lucas should have been a producer who oversaw the special effects of it all.
It's what we're seeing Taylor Sheridan do now.
Right.
He's understood that he has to step out the way.
Right.
Plus, he gets $10,000 a head for every horse they use, and $50,000 a day that they're on that ranch. He doesn't care about directing. Also, no slight to you, Taylor Sheridan.
Right. Get yours. It's fine.
Yeah.
Another example of like a monoculture. I'm not gonna.
Yes. Oh, but I love that he is our 2020s version of All in the Family. And who's that guy? Pete.
Yeah, I know you're talking. It's the guy who did all the shows.
Maude, Jefferson.
I can't pull his name now, but it was the main TV producer for everything that was back in the day.
Yeah, and we just now have that. And
he always wore the pork pie hat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's still alive.
Yeah, right.
But that's just Taylor is that, and all of it is laughing in the face of those who are like, I'm him. Yes. Okay, so then who writes and directs the ones after the 7 and the
after?
Because he sold his rights.
Yeah, Disney buys Star Wars,
and they don't mess around.
And they bought it for $4 billion. And Lucas was like, "Well, here's the next 3 movies," and they were like, "Thank you very much. We paid you $4 billion.
Bye.
See ya." And Lucas was like, "Well, okay."
And as we've learned, Disney lawyers don't play.
Right. And so
we in Florida.
J.J. Abrams does 7.
Oh, okay.
And 9, and then Ryan Johnson does 8, which is again. So here's
that's why you're okay.
So the real rub there is that Disney did not have a real story to tell over 3 movies, and so it jumps from one thing to another thing, and then people were so assholery about The Last Jedi that Disney freaked, because here's what the problem with Disney is, right? They only give a shit about the bottom line. They don't give a shit about movies, but right. So when they started releasing all these movies, Solo started to do bad. So Solo's directed by Ron Howard, and when he comes in and kind of like makes its money back, but and they're like, people were like, well, shit, we're doing, because they wanted to do a Star Wars movie every single year. They were going to do trilogy, then a couple of solo movies, not solos, but
like anthology films.
Yeah.
Right, and then go to another movie, and then basically follow the 3-year pattern that the other trilogies have done. But once Solo doesn't do very well, Rogue One is well received, but it starts to kind of overpopulate and oversaturate the market. Then they freak out. So when the reaction to The Last Jedi is ridiculous and it's so, divisive, they shift course and then they go, and it's not great either. So
okay, so it's
but there was no cohesive voice. There was no cohesive story because they kind of left it up to each director.
Which is wild because they have the money to bring in like a lead writer and say, you are going to make sure that there is a line through everything and it is cohesive and connects. But they didn't.
Well, and a lot of what they did too when the $4 billion was done is that they kind of came in and said, hey, the original trilogy and the prequels, that's canon. And then everything else, see it. Like all the books, all the comic books, all the video games, like everyone all this, the diehards love.
Star Wars is life.
Right. Those guys, they basically said, look, we're going to put all that aside. So don't consider any of that. So we're going to basically take the story in a new direction. And here it is. And then, there's still talk of a Rian Johnson trilogy. That's not going to be based on the Skywalker clan.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's really where, like, I think if Disney had just wrapped up Luke's arc rather than tying it into Daisy's arc. If they'd have just done a three series where it's Luke and Leia and like they're devastated by blah blah blah, and then they got to come back and then they find whatever the final path is for the Jedi. Then brought in all these other directors to tell stories in this wide, expansive universe you have.
Because there's that again, limiting yourself.
Right.
You have so much to work with. And
so maybe we get to that. I think at this point though, I can't see like this will never engineer this amount of passion anymore. I mean, even that Mandalorian and Andor are good. You still get Boba Fett and Obi-Wan. I haven't seen all of these. I'm just going by critical reaction and fan reaction to the point. I think you get to where we are with Marvel, which is just oversaturation. We're done. Well, we've seen these stories over and over and over again. And Guardians 3 is a decent movie. It's fun because Gunn brings a visual flair to it, and he knows how to make him fun. But again, at the end of the day, I just don't care about these characters anymore.
That much.
Right. And so I think it's interesting where they're finally 20 years later starting to like dig into, and people of color, where you're talking the Blue Beetle and so there's, and like Miss Marvel and there's, but again, you have to deal with the backlash of all of that too, which is crazy. But
I will say I've heard that. Yes, backlash. But on the other side, people have really loved about Miss Marvel is the authenticity, because they're like, I loved her, how family was really involved. Again, watching a podcast, and others on the podcast were like, right, because one thing we know to be fully true of non-white families and cultures is that children don't have privacy, and it doesn't matter how old you are. So there's no way she could have hidden this. So the family had to be involved, and I was like, oh, that is, and I'm like, I guarantee you they probably talked about that in the writer's room.
Right.
And we're like, yes, we have to have the family involved or something. And so going back to like kind of what we both said, we're all kind of saying is, and it's that word of innovation. When you bring in the inclusivity, when you bring in the innovation, you start getting new things that people are like, okay, I hadn't paid attention to y'all in 10 years, but I like this. Let me try it out. Or, oh, this is different. What are you offering? I'm going to look at it, but right now we're just getting the same old stories. They were wronged, and here they are on their journey.
Yeah, and you're pandering to those middle-aged white guys who can't let go of the story they grew up with. And I'm obviously being generalizing, right? But like you just said, when you bring in inclusivity, you are opening up new stories, which you are opening up the door to new fans, right? To new eyes, to experiences that those people are recognizing in themselves on screen. And then maybe you're building a bridge to a kind of like larger cultural awareness and empathy at that point.
Right.
Or at least a better understanding.
But when you step out of the pandering, because I know like with DC Black God, people were like, oh, this is terrible. But I think it was because a lot of it is they were like, we're going to go with this typecast person. And we know that he's already crossed over into this audience, so we're going to do this. And whereas I know me personally, interested in that world, I'm like, I want the family of anti-heroes. Where's my movie about those that I've heard there's a comic about?
Right.
I want to know about these people.
I do think it's good, to a certain extent, that we're getting these movies like Woman King, like Polite Society, things like The Umbrella Academy, which is kind of leaning into Ellen Page, and so
good.
So I'm interested. I just wish that it seems like when you get into this Disney realm, that the powers that be are so, like, if you look at the sequel trilogy for Star Wars, it's a bigger Death Star.
Yeah.
It's another kind of Darth Vader.
Very true.
It is another kind of Emperor Palpatine. There's nothing new being told there aside from
the beats are all the same.
Right,
for
they're identical.
For the first three.
It's right, and again, it's one of those things where we haven't had a story in so long, and that's familiar and it's fine, but it's at a certain point you can't beat us over the head with the same shit over and over and over again, unless you and so I'm hoping that we but I don't know what they're going. I don't think Disney's the right outlet for any of that stuff. To be honest, I don't think they're going to be the ones who are going to be laying the groundwork for innovative cinema, because what they're doing now is, so.
They might put it back in the vault.
Well, it's and again, I hate to
on it 100 years later.
Right, I hate to bang the drum, but if you're already making a live action remake of Moana, what are you doing?
Right.
Are there no stories to be told anymore? And again, I don't have any problem with making a live action Moana.
No, but why? We just got the cartoon is still kicking. I just bought in December from the cartoon a nice little dress up outfit that then I watched the nieces clamor towards, and they don't need a live action. They don't care about that.
Well, and not only that, but you're not doing anything with the live action, right?
Except pissing off people because your portrayals and they're like, you had one culture and you're picking people from a different culture here, but
well, okay, and I think that actually can be interesting, right? I think that if you want to tell the story from a different perspective, I think that's a really and not to say that there's a difference between white and black mermaid culture. I'm just that's even going to be portrayed, right?
Boy, do they have a surprise for us when we see it.
If you hated Billy D. So there's something to be said there, but you have to obviously bring something to the story, or you need to tell the stories that are difficult to tell in live action, which I'm going to bang the drum for Emperor's New Groove. Tell that live action story because I want to see that one.
Okay, but really, I want to see that one, and I think there's so much there. Sadly, you've waited so long that Eartha Kitt is no longer with us,
right.
But Tracy Ellis Ross would kill that.
Right.
Eat it up, have a good time with it, and that is one of the only ones where you have a actual family. You have a husband, you have a mom, she was pregnant, she made her own decisions. She's kind of pretty much running the household, actually. You've got a family, kids that are smart.
She never had that kid, did she?
No.
I don't think so. Not even
Emperor's
New School, which is a favorite of mine.
Well, pregnancy there. But I want to see that one. I think it'll be really cool with the history. Even somebody said they were like, Road to El Dorado would be a fun one to remake, do at Atlantis. If you do that one, it's gonna give you a lot. Yeah. Oh, that one would be really good.
Right. Visit ones that didn't do well when you first put them out.
But now they're classics.
But can we get a live action Great Mouse Detective, please?
Okay.
Sure. The Goofy movie.
I just need them to do better than they did with Rats and Nim, because
that wasn't Disney, was it?
No, it wasn't. That was Don Bluth. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was hurt by that one. Okay.
That was such a staple of my childhood that it's hard for me. And I read the book, but it's hard for me to separate the two. So I don't remember now what the difference between the two of them were really. To be honest.
Get that.
And the movie was obviously so much more easy to get into, but not get into, you know what I'm saying? But you watched it more.
Yeah.
It's a 2-hour time block, but.
I will often just walk around and say to people, "Ooh, a sparkly."
Now I kind of feel like I'm doing a series on my public page of where I'm going back to the books that nobody reviews on social media, and that we need to maybe bring back a little bit, that we loved in elementary and middle school and high school, and now I have to go back to those. All right. Gems.
You got any series on Ramona or anything like that?
Flowers for Algernon?
Yeah.
Okay, no. No. Although my sister loved Flowers, and I have always been like, ooh, why again? But it hooked her.
I don't know. In grade school, we read Hamlet, so that's...
My students read that, and I had to read it. But like I just did.
Can you see the review of Hamlet?
Maniac. I should.
Dude actually, cannot make up his mind.
Actually, I'm going to. But I did Maniac McGee, and then House on Mango Street. But now I'm definitely going to do Hamlet. Also, throw in some Romeo and Juliet. Give my opinion. But going back to, I just think. But speaking of, those are stories that people have tried to very much, how can we bend? How can we break? How can we redo, get innovative with the same lines that have been around for a long time? Why is Disney not doing it with all that they have available to them?
Money.
And there's
money.
And I mean, they're seeing, but...
And because they're like the Empire, and they just can't let go of power and control.
They're very true. Because, I mean, they've tried live action. They did Belle. It's a flop. Cinderella was a flop.
Well, I mean, they weren't flops monetarily speaking.
I guess.
Just critically.
Beauty and the Beast was probably one of the most, one of the highest grossing films of that year.
I feel like I heard no one talking about it, but I guess
no one talks about it now,
right.
But everyone saw it when it came out.
Okay.
Right.
Oh.
So all of them they've all made their money back.
We went to see it because we love the cartoon.
Right. And you want to
that's how they get us.
Right. Yep. But I think that's wearing off then too, right? I mean, so was Aladdin the last one they did?
Yeah.
No, Pinocchio. Pinocchio was a direct to...
Right.
Really?
Was a Tom Hanks disaster. It was direct to Disney
Peter Pan and Wendy.
Yeah, I don't count
that as a cartoon.
Right. They've done that story so many different times that I don't think that they were
Sandy
really...
Duncan.
Right, and the one that I like the most is the Green Dragon, and again,
Pete's Dragon.
Pete's Dragon, yeah, not the Green Dragon. It was the same director by the Green Dragon, but
there's the Green Knight.
The Green. The Green Knight rides the Pete's Dragon, that one.
As it chases Peter Pan and Wendy.
I was with you. I knew.
I'm starting to sundown. It's cool. No big deal.
Do you want to wrap this show up, man?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, final thoughts. I think, are you gonna, like you said, you'd introduce kids to it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, coming out of it, 40 years later after it's originally finished, do you feel like the fandom is warranted? And is there anything that just kind of sticks out to you as like, why did that hit?
So I think the fandom, people need something, and there are worse things. But I also think that something keeps feeding it, and so they're going to continue to eat. With the first three, that's it. If my kids want to go further, no offense, y'all haven't sold it to me. And I think that's okay.
I don't think I'm the salesman for that.
No. But I'm gonna take them. We're gonna watch the first three, and then we're gonna go watch She-Ra, and the Netflix animation, and have some conversations about that. And then I'm going to introduce them to my world of Avatar, and that's when they'll be like, "You lady need help." Right. And they'll find their own fandom to really cling and love, or their book that they will say, this is the thing that really molded me into being a better person.
Yeah, do we think that exists today? I mean, like that area of where people can be that passionate about it? Because the Marvel stuff is so all over the place, right? There's so many different avenues. I can't imagine that's inspiring.
Okay. So... It's a book series that I believe they've already optioned the rights for, and everybody, that including myself even, I'm like, and I hate adapts. Please don't adapt anything. But I'm like, yeah, I want to see what y'all do with this. And it started, it's called the Legendborn series. And I might even talked about it when I was on last time. It is a black young girl in the South. She starts out at 16. I think by the time the book's finished, she's going to probably be about 21. And it is the Arthurian tale, King Arthur. And they bring in not Mary Magdalene. That was not. Guinevere. Guinevere, all Lancelot, and it's not Mary Magdalene.
And his sister was Morgana.
They have her tribe, and they delve into it while also very much delving into Black culture, ancestral ties. They took herbs, midwifery, the Underground Railroad, like toning, but also what do your European beliefs and cultures, and how are they colliding into one person, and why do they collide into this one person? And the fandom in that one is growing very, very strong. And strong enough even that when people come in and they're like, I don't like this, there's a direct call out of why. What are you not liking about this? And every time they're on book 2, I think there are 2 more. So I'm thinking by the 4th one, it will have grown in such popularity. But I could see if this drops in a good film with good cast, how they could probably get a lot of Game of Thrones like.
Yeah, I think the only other one that I can think of is Harry Potter, right? That's the only one that kind of captured the imagination.
I forget about them. And I grew up with Harry Potter. I did follow in order.
But this sounds like the kind of innovation, the kind of direction that we were just talking about has been lacking, right? From like a Star Wars type series. So that can be really interesting to see. Hopefully that builds and grows.
Because even when Harry Potter came out, there was some critiques.
Well, I think
in the time of like,
for sure,
put these flat characters in. People didn't really like how Harry was just a bumbling hero,
and also like Satan and magic and like.
Oh, that's right. But that's right, because I was in Georgetown, Texas, and the bookstore there could only get limited copies because parents had complained. Yeah. And so my parents had to wake up at 5 a.m. to have me there.
I'm going to open up a bookstore where people can just come in, buy books, and burn them in the store. It'll be big in Texas.
There's the fire pit right there.
Right. So that's something to look forward to. Dev'n, thank you for joining us today on this special episode. It was excellent. And anything else, Jason?
I think we're good.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Until next time, may the screen be with you.
Show and I do the entertaining, thank you. Let's go out with something really hot for these folks. A big hit out of 77. Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Give me the Star Wars, don't let them end. Star Wars, if they should bar wars, please let these Star Wars stay. And hey, how about that nutty Star Wars bar? Can you forget all the creatures in there? And hey, Darth Vader in that black and evil mask, did he scare you as much as he scared me? Star Wars, those near and far wars, my 7th winner up here, Star Wars.
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time.